This is a first. Well, actually it's three firsts. It's the first time I've seen a dedicated reverse gear for backing up on an electric trike. It's the first time I've seen a full suspension electric trike, and that handlebar, well, yeah, that's a first too. So do all these firsts equal better e-biking experience, or are they just different to be different? Well, I've spent the last week with the PuckiPuppy Rottweiler here, and I've got some thoughts. So in this review, let's check out all the things that are different and unique about the PuckiPuppy Rottweiler. All right, so let's talk about just the basics of the PuckiPuppy Rottweiler. So this is an electric trike, as you can obviously tell just by the three-wheel configuration. And this is a Class 2 e-bike, meaning that we have pedal assist and throttle assistance up to, they say 15 miles an hour, but as you'll see when we go out on a ride, I was pretty consistently able to hit 16 miles an hour. But this is not going to be a full Class 3 over 20, 28 miles an hour. You can't unlock it to those speeds because it's a trike, and there's always the concern of not going too fast in cornering and tipping hazards. They try to keep these these speeds lower, which help with improving overall max payload and keeping things safer when you're turning. Now, in terms of price, this is priced at $2,400, and they advertise it as weighing 120 pounds, so it's definitely a big boy here. But when I put this up on the scale, the way you see it with the racks and everything in place, it was about 117 pounds, so not quite 120, and I'd rather see it come in lower than higher than advertised, so that's good in my book. But it also has a folding mechanism, so this is technically still a folding electric trike, but the folding only can do so much. It's still basically a 120-pound large trike, so that's something to keep in mind. You're not going to be able to fold this into some small space, but you can minimize its footprint just a little bit, give you a couple extra feet of room for storage space and things like that. So for some people, that will actually be a really nice feature, and for others, you may never even fold it ever at all. Just going to be depending on how you set it up and how you need it. Now, in terms of the bike itself, like I said, it weighed 117 the way it sits, but that battery it has in the down tube, that weighed about 8.5 pounds. And in terms of sizing and frames, this is a one size fits most, and that most is going to be a range from 5 foot flat on the bottom end all the way up to 6'2". Now I'm 5'11", so I'm kind of closer to the higher end on that scale, and I found it to fit me just fine. The reach is kind of long on this bike, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But at the end of the day, I still found it to be comfortable. I still think at 6'2", you'd be fine. I felt like I had room to go up and out as far as like the seat height and things like the handlebar. It was still comfortable, and I think you'd be fine up at 6'2". I don't always say that when it's not quite clear, but I think this one you would be fine. Now, if you're 5 foot flat, it may feel a little big to you. The handlebars might be a little bit high because, as you can see, they do telescope up and down, but they're all the way down right now, and they kind of sit out in front of me like this. So at 5'11", that's for me, but if you're 5 foot flat, you might find up your handlebars almost like a motorcycle style. So that's something to keep in mind if you are 5 foot flat and you're considering this. Maybe just get on one at a local shop that sells them, or see if a buddy has one, or just check those measurements on the website against yourself and see how it might fit on you better. But I think for the most part, that 5 foot to 6'2" range is going to be a solid range estimate. Now, in terms of colors, this is the blue option, and there's also a black option. Now, the blue option, as you can see, has black accents on all the contact points, the saddle, the tires, the fenders, the wheels, the front suspension. But then the black version is basically all black because the accents are also black, and then the branding of PuckiPuppy for the brand is in a white, easy to see color. So you basically have the black or blue color options. Now, the frame geometry numbers, the wheelbase from rear hub to front hub or vice versa is 50 inches, so a solid 50 inches there. The standover height at the lowest point, so the lowest point you can actually step over that frame where the frame dips down, that is going to be at 15 inches. It's a nice step through frame, nice and low, easy to get on and off, which is nice on trikes. And then the saddle height can be raised and lowered by about 7 to 8 inches. And then up top, the reach is advertised on their website as 26.4 inches. And if you're kind of deep into the bike world, you know that 26-inch reach is pretty massive. But I looked at their geometry chart, and you could see they were measuring that from the seat tube to the handlebar up top, when in reality it's more commonly measured at the plane of which the bottom bracket's on, so actually starting here instead of back here. And when you take that into consideration, the reach is actually more like 21, 22 inches. And you've got that really unique, they call it butterfly style handlebar that has lots of different hand placements, so you can find different ways to hold it. Plus the reach, I think it will work for most people. Just take that with a grain of salt if you look at their website and see that it has a 26.5-inch reach. Like I said, it's more like about 22 inches, depending on how you hold the handlebars or position your hands. Now, in terms of extra features, so the tires and wheels on here are 20-inch alloy wheels, and they're wrapped in a 20x4-inch all-terrain tire. It is an unbranded tire, but I had no issues with it. It's got some nice knobbies on it for a little bit of all-terrain riding, which I don't know how much you could do in a trike, but nonetheless, you do have that on here. Now, in terms of fenders, we have fenders on all 3 wheels. They are a plastic fender. They're nice and quiet. They can bend without breaking, and I had no issues out of those fenders either. The basket itself that comes with it is a pretty giant cargo basket. It measures 17 inches long by 20 inches wide, and it's about 12 inches deep, so you can put a lot of cargo in here. And that brings me to my next number, which is the max payload on the Rottweiler, which is 500 pounds. So a really nice heavy payload, whether you're a heavier rider or you're just not a heavier rider, but you bring a lot of extra gear with you, or you put your, whatever you take with you, that max payload can make or break your e-bike purchase. So this one does have a pretty hefty max payload at 500 pounds. So for some of you guys, that will be a really solid feature as well. And so in terms of other mounting points, we do have the front basket up front. You can mount up front, and then you have the rear basket in the rear. So you have everything you need as far as bringing a lot of gear, as long as you stay within that 500-pound payload. Now, when it comes to lighting, you have a really nice adjustable angle, big moto style headlight up front. And then you have 2 taillights on the rear of the e-trike here, and both offer tail lights, so they have a solid on when you're in the on position. They don't have a braking highlight, but they do have turn signals, and they really uniquely, when you hit the turn signal in either direction, both tail lights will kind of send like directional light arrows heading that way to let the person behind you know that you plan on turning. It's actually a really nice turn signal setup. I wish they would add a braking highlight to it, but nonetheless, the way it sits right now, nice lighting front to back with turn signals is pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about the power delivery on this, because with a 500-pound payload and almost 120 pounds of total bike weight here, you're going to expect some decent amount of muscle to be able to move that appropriately. So they do have that. In the rear, along the axle, we have a hub-style motor that's mounted centrally along the axle, and that's rated at 750 watts nominally, but it peaks at 960 watts and has a pretty solid 90 Newton meters of torque. Now, what that equates to on a bike like this is pretty confident acceleration. It's pretty peppy. Get up and go is right where you'd want it, but you can feather that with the throttle. You can also dial that back in the settings, which I'll show you in a minute. If you want to slow things down, you can definitely do that as well. And you can even limit the speeds to go below that 15-mile-an-hour max. You can limit it down to as low as I think about 8 miles an hour, and then as high as about 15 miles an hour. And like I said, this is no unlocking to class 2 or class 3 speeds, or class 3 speeds, excuse me. So you are limited to the 15 miles an hour, but that is pretty standard across electric trikes, almost across the board, except for one I can think of. Now, in terms of the sensor, this motor has a torque sensor, so you're going to get that natural pedal assistance feel rather than a more clunky on-off cadence sensor feel like you might be seeing on a lower tiered bike. And then the power modes, or the ride modes of pedal assistance, are levels 1 through 5, so they're just numerical, 1 being the low end and high being the fastest end. And on top of that, you also have cruise control, which you can access by holding the minus button on the display pad when you're at a set speed, and it'll hold it there. But I also found out accidentally there's another way to turn on cruise control, and that is if you're riding with this throttle on full blast, going that full 15-16 miles an hour and just holding it there for about 5 to 7 seconds, somewhere in there, it activates a cruise control. Now that's good because it's another way to have cruise control on max speed if you're going on a flat straight road. The problem I had with it was I didn't know that turned on cruise control, and so while I had it kind of floored with the throttle, I was approaching a turn up ahead, and I just let off the throttle expecting a coast slowdown so I could turn, and it didn't happen because I was in cruise control mode, and there's no icon on the screen when you activate it that way. So it kind of startled me, and I didn't want that to startle anybody at home, so I figured I'd at least let you be aware of that. If you do hold the throttle at full speed, at least for my unit here, it did hold a cruise control at max speed. But if you don't want the max speed cruise control, like I said, just hold the minus button at any speed you're at, and it will give you that as a set cruise control for that specific speed. So a couple options to have cruise control, which is kind of nice. Now, in terms of battery, we have a 48-volt battery in that massive down tube there. That massive battery, 48 volts, 15 amp hours for a total of 720 watt hours, giving us quite a bit of power to work with, which makes sense on a heavier bike with kind of a beefier motor. Now, in terms of warranty, the battery, the bike itself, it's a 2-year warranty with this setup. And in terms of range, They advertise it as being able to reach between 40 on the low end and 55 on the high end in mileage. So pretty solid range numbers. And when you talk about who wants to buy a trike, I don't see this as being anyone wanting one that's a super long distance, going 50 plus, 70 plus miles in a single trip. Generally, they're going to be small trips around town, and that should give you plenty of trips, multiple trips before needing to do a full recharge. All right, now when it comes to the drivetrain and components on the Rottweiler, we have a unique setup. So we have, well, unique, but it's pretty standard for a trike. In the back here, we have a 7-speed derailleur that's centrally mounted along the axle, and that's a Shimano Tourney 7-speed derailleur. And then you have a 40-tooth chainring up front, and that's running on a corrosion-resistant chain all the way back to the cassette, which is an 11 to 28. So 7 speeds, 11 to 28 in the rear, 40-tooth chainring up front, for a pretty nice drivetrain that I was able to get usage out of at all speeds, all the way up to 15 miles an hour with no ghost pedaling. It's got a nice low end and a nice high end. Pretty much everything you would need for this trike, because you're not going to be pedaling it very much, especially under load, without using that motor. And the motor tops out at 15, and these gear ranges are all very usable within that 15 miles an hour that the bike can achieve. Now, in terms of braking, it is a hydraulic disc brake setup, and they are 2-piston calipers on all 3 wheels. So we have rotors and calipers on all 3 wheels, the front and the 2 rear. Each one is a 160 millimeter rotor with a 1.8 millimeter thickness and a 2-piston caliper. Now, in terms of the saddle here, so this saddle I have actually kind of come to appreciate. So I've seen backrest support saddles before, but they don't always have this level of adjustability that I'm about to show you. So first off, it's nice and wide. It's got really thick padding on it. But beyond that, you have this backrest that you can adjust several ways. You can loosen this back portion here, and you can slide that lumbar kind of support up or down based on where you want it. And then you simply just tighten it back in place. Then on the bottom side of this saddle, there's an Allen head key for both of these arms of the backrest poles. And so when you loosen those, you can actually slide this seat forward and backward, slide the backrest forward and backward, allowing you to kind of figure out just how, your body size, how you sit, where you want that support at. You can really dial it in forward, backward, up and down. And then if you loosen the main bolt on the bottom of the saddle, you can actually adjust the tilt of the saddle, whether you want to tilt it more forward, tilt it more backward, and then tighten it back in place. So lots of adjustability in this saddle. And I think that's a good thing, because saddles are really subjective to each person, what they think is comfortable. And having this much adjustability in it at all the areas you can just allows you to get the most out of any saddle. So I think most people will find a comfortable way for this saddle to work, which is not always the case on bikes. So kudos to them for this saddle. Now below this, you may notice the full suspension aspect of this trike. Like I said, never seen full suspension on a trike before, and this time we have it. So up front we have a fork, I'll show you in a second, but in the rear we have 2 spring coil spring shock absorbers in the back. Now you can actually adjust the tension of those springs by holding the shock body, and you can see I'll turn it, and there's a threaded kind of coil over, and so what happens is as you turn it, you can compress that shock more for a tighter setup, or you can loosen it more for kind of a looser setup. Just depends on what you want. Now I will say you're not going to get a ton of felt impact on the rear end of this suspension. It is there, and you do feel it on a larger drop, like coming off of a curb or something like that. But on day-to-day minor road imperfections, you already get a good benefit from these thicker 4-inch wide tires, and you're not going to see much from the rear end suspension, just for the bigger, harsher stuff, speed bumps, potholes, drop-off curbs, things like that. Now, moving up front to the front suspension, we have an 80 millimeter coil fork. Now this one is not adjustable, so there's no preload, no lockout, and the bolted axle, the axle up front is secured with a bolted front axle. So no quick release, no through axle, and 80 millimeters of travel on a fairly smaller 32 millimeter stanchion here. That's kind of chromed out as well. Now, moving up front to the other first on this bike is this handlebar. And maybe you've seen this kind before, but I have not really seen it. I've seen things similar to it in like the bike packing world, where people pack on tons of gear and they head out for weeks and months at a time on their bike. Because the reason why this is kind of unique for this bike is many times when you have a single flat bar design, once you get your grips on there, your shifters, your brake levers, your bell, your display, there's not a lot of room left over for you to add maybe a phone holder. I see people add cup holders. Some people want rear view mirrors. You just want some extra real estate to be able to attach whatever accessories you want. And that's what this handlebar facilitates. So you've got your grips just like you would expect. You've got your twist throttle here. You've got your selector switch to go from drive, which is all your forward usage, to R, which is going to be your reverse usage. You simply flip this on, use the throttle just like you would, and it will back the trike up. Really nice feature, not always seen on trikes, because on a regular two-wheeled bike, you can simply just put your feet down and kind of pick up the bike and turn around, or you can back it up with your feet, but it's not as easy on a trike, so having that reverse gear on this heavy bike is really, really nice feature. On top of that, so we've got our grips, we've got our twist throttle, we've got our drive, forward, or reverse selector. We have our Shimano over-the-bar shifters here that have kind of little windows so you can see what speed you're in. And then we have our brake levers on both sides. We do have a parking brake lever on this left side. So what happens is when I pull it back, I can put that clip in place and it prevents that front wheel from moving at all, which is nice because trikes, unlike a two-wheeled bike that's on a kickstand, if it's on uneven ground, the kickstand is going to prevent it mostly from rolling. But a trike, unless you're on perfectly flat ground, a trike will just start to roll one way or the other. So parking brakes are kind of a must, and they did include that, which is nice. We also have our PAS control pad here on this kind of front centerpiece for this really nice large 4.7-inch color display, which I'll show you in just a second. And then beyond that, you have lots of different ways to kind of hold your hands. You can rest your hands in different ways. You have tons of real estate to add whatever accessories you want to add. So it's just a bar that's kind of built for utility and a little bit for comfort. The padding goes all the way around, so you've got lots of different hand positions, and then you've still got lots of real estate to add whatever clip-on accessories you would like to add to it. Now, the stem itself, we have two portions to think about. So one portion is going to be the folding aspect, because the trike does technically fold, but the other aspect is a quick release lever here, so you can actually raise this up or down based on your reach fit that you want, that you find comfortable. So you've got a couple ways to adjust that as well. Now, the cable management is a little messy on this bike. We've got quite a few cables coming off into this cable wrap, and then they kind of go to their final destination. I'd like to see it a little bit more cleaned up, but that is what you get when you can't route anything through a stem and you've got all the controls coming off. They've got to go somewhere, so at least they do have the management cable housing for these. Other than that, let's take a closer look at this full color display, because there's a big, nice view on it and some cool features you can do in it with some limiting things as well, so we'll talk about that in the display. All right, so this is the display. As you can see, it's pretty big. That's a 4.7-inch full color display. It's even got a nice little protective edge on it like you get for your cell phones. They included that with it. I don't know if that shows on camera. I just thought that was a cool touch as well. So let's go through the basics on here. We have right here in the center is going to be your speed in miles per hour, which you can change to kilometers. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Bottom left is going to be your pedal assist level. So it's at 0, but as we go up, you can see that will change based on what we're pressing on the control pad. Over on the right is the odometer. The top left, I thought this was an error at first, or a warning, because that's the kind of light you see in your vehicle when your car's overheating or something. But what this is actually just an icon that's telling you about your engine temperature, and as you ride it, you will see that kind of go up a little bit. But if it gets too high or you get any warnings, that's when you should deal with it. Other than that, it's just there as a visual indicator about your motor's temperature. Now over on the right, you'll see we have the wattage, and as we use it, when we go on rides, as the motor's being used, you'll see that kind of fluctuate, being used real time dynamically. And then in the same spot, but over on the left, we have the battery in 2 5-bar measurement bars. So basically, it'll drop down sequentially as it gets lower and lower and lower, so you can visually see where your battery's at. Now, if you want some other just quick metrics, you can tap the power button. You can see trip meter 4.6, trip time 37 miles, and back to the odometer. Now, if you want to change some of the more advanced things, there's not a lot to do on this app. I'd like to think with this much real estate in the screen, we could have a couple more options to tweak, but we only have a few, so I'll show you those now. To access them, you're just simply going to hold plus and minus, and that's going to take us to the speed. Now, it says 24.8, but you can go all the way down to, I think, 19.7 or 19.8, and that will still be the 15-mile-an-hour max. But as you go lower, this will start to slowly bring down that top speed of the trike. So if you want to dial it back and not have a full 15 miles an hour, maybe while you're learning to corner on a trike, those are the times you want to just bring that speed down. And it's easy to do, and then easy to put it back. I had it all the way up just to see if I could get it go over 15 miles an hour, but I couldn't. So you can even leave it right back at that factory setting of 19.8, which is the way it's shipped here. Now, backlight, that's going to be the brightness of the backlight. So we got 1, 2, and 3. I'll leave it on the brightest one for now. And then units here, you can change between kilometers per hour and miles per hour. You see it toggle when I switch there. So we'll keep it in miles per hour. And then the voltage at 48 volts, which I would not be adjusting that. And then other than that, you tap it again. You start right back at the beginning. Holding it takes you back to the main display. Now, some other small features to be aware of. The walk mode on here, if you want some assistance, you don't want to push the bike, but you're walking with it. You want a little bit like a 2-3 mile an hour walk speed with you. You could hold down this minus button where it's got the little person on a bike icon, and that will activate walking mode. You've also got a headlight indicator with the plus sign, and if you hold that, you'll see the icon come on for the headlight, and the headlight is on up front, and you can hold it again to turn it off. And then for the turn signals, simply left and right buttons, hit it again to turn it off, left button, hit it again to turn it off. And you've got everything you need on here. I'd like a couple extra more things to look at or tweak, but that's maybe just the techie inside of me. Other than that, for your average person who just wants to ride and see the basic metrics, it's got everything you need to see. And this display is really high contrast, really easy to see in all lighting situations. Color and contrast wise, it's probably one of my favorite screens. And other than that, it's been pretty simple to work with, and there's no app for this trike, so no need to worry about pairing your phone or anything like that. All right, we are out here on the PuckiPuppy Rottweiler, and I've currently got it in PAS1, and as you can see, I'm using the throttle only, going about 7 to 8 miles an hour. But I wanted to kind of talk about the riding position, because the riding position on this is largely dependent on 2 factors that I can tell. One is going to be how you arrange the seat back position with all the different seat adjustments you can make. So the backrest, high and low, forward and backwards, the seat angle, the seat height. That's going to largely depend on how the bike fits you. But on top of that, the reach out here, like I said, is a little long. So if you have very short arms or a very short upper torso, you might find it a little bit long, but I think for most average height people, it'll feel fine. And then you have always lots of different resting positions with this kind of unique handlebar they went with. Let's do a quick acceleration test. You can see the path up ahead dead ends, but we're going to take a right where it dead ends. Let's see if we can get to the max speed before then. The motor is pretty punchy on here, but at the end of the day, it's still a trike. So 3, 2, 1. So nice chill start, but it quickly ramps up here. We're at 9. Oh, we're at average speed. Oops. 14, 15. There we go. Max speed. Now you see, I held the throttle for a few seconds, and look, it's holding in cruise control. So that's something you want to be aware of. So I'll tap the brakes. It's got motor cut off, so it starts to slow down, and then I can apply the brake and hit the turn. And you see I hit that turn around 8 to 10 miles an hour, somewhere in that range. But this hill here is a good indicator of how the trike performs. This is really steep right here. This is probably 10% or so. Starts to level a little bit, but it's still uphill all the way up to the interstate up there. And so we're holding about 12. We're slowly increasing speed. Slowly, still increasing speed despite being on an incline. Actually, no, we're holding about 12 miles an hour because it's starting to drop a little bit here. Not a lot. We've lost about... we still have it on cruise control because I just was holding the throttle again. But you can see, on a fairly steep incline for a sustained climb like this, we kind of fluctuated between 11 and 12 miles an hour. This is one of the more steeper parts besides that first part, and we're dipping down just a bit again, but not much. We never went below 11 until I hit the brakes there. One of my favorite things about this trike that not all trikes have is this reverse feature. So I can come to a stop. I have to turn around. Instead of making a big wide turn, I just put it in reverse. I can back up, hit the brake, go back to drive, and start riding again. Got a cyclist coming up. Hi. All right, so let's head back down this hill, and as we go down this hill, we'll get speeds up, and we'll try these brakes, because these brakes are 2-piston calipers on rotors at all 3 wheels of the trike. So we're getting full braking power at all 3 wheels. Looks like the max we're gonna go speed-wise. Let's see what we got, 16. So next time we hit 16, I'm gonna just go ahead and do the brakes, so about the highest speed possible. the end of this hill really sharply drops down, and I know the speed will pick up there. But it's also a blind corner, so I don't want to go too fast. All right, 3, 2, 1. So that's on a steep decline, kind of going around a corner. And as you can see, it braked really nicely. There's another spot around here that might be kind of relevant. There's like this little climb full of really chunky gravel. And I know this is not a gravel trike, but we have all-terrain wheels. We have, all-terrain tires. We have full suspension. So let's see how it does on just a big kind of chunky path. Now the rocks on this gravel are like, they're kind of the size of like baseballs and tennis balls. They're fairly good size, 3-4 inches, almost like an unfinished cobblestone. So let's see how this does going up that. And it actually goes up this hill. So I'm going to turn around so we can get just a little bit of momentum heading up that hill. So I'm going to turn around here. But everything's quiet and smooth. Like there's no kind of crazy sounds or anything. It does pretty good. So let's head up this. And this part's just mostly dirt, and then we'll come up into this really chunky gravel. So made it up that climb, no problem. As you can see, pretty chunky stuff. But with full suspension, I mean, it's not making it incredibly smooth, but it is taking the edge off a little bit. And it's nice to know that even with the trike, you could probably still take a gravel road or, you know, explore a little bit and not be just stuck to the pavement or concrete only. But let's go back and put it up on a stand and kind of talk about it from an ownership standpoint. Everything as far as how it rides, 15 mile an hour max, torque sensor, cruise control, even have these turn signals, a lot of nice features. But let's go back, put it on the rack, and talk about what it's like to live with something like this, maybe the not so obvious features, and then we can wrap this up. All right, so let's talk about the Rottweiler from more of an ownership standpoint, things you should just be aware of when you buy one, things that are not always so obviously apparent when you're on the website and making a purchase, just to get it home, and then you find out after a couple rides, oh, I didn't realize it had this issue, or I didn't realize that feature caused this. Just things like that I like to bring up now so you can make the best decision you can after you've seen a review. So I'll start with some of the things that are good, and then I'll go into the things that just should be on your radar, not necessarily bad things, but things that you should just be aware of. So the good on this that I'll start with, the 3-wheel braking, it makes for nice, secure braking. We also have parking brake levers that will allow the trike to stay put on any kind of uneven ground. That may seem like a small thing or a very just straightforward thing, but it goes a long way in everyday life. I've had trikes before that don't have a parking brake, and anytime you walk away from them, they just start creeping around, and then you're looking for a rock or something to put under the wheel. So I'm glad they put it there. It's not always the case, but it's going to go a long way in just everyday practicality. Again, the 3-wheel braking gives you solid braking on all 3 wheels rather than just the 2 rear or 1 front, 1 rear. You have nice 3-wheel stopping power, which is going to go further. Under load, 500-pound capacity, you want more braking, and that's what we have with 3 calipers hitting 3 rotors here. On top of that, we have a Shimano drivetrain. So the Shimano Tourney rear derailleur, the Shimano index shifters, the Shimano Hyperglide cassette in the rear. All those, if you have any drivetrain issues, your local bike shop can fix those quickly, service them, replace them. They're familiar with those parts. There's no kind of obscure random third-party parts that they're not used to seeing, which is good. On top of that, the last thing that's a really good thing that you don't always get on trikes, actually often you don't get on trikes, is a dedicated reverse gear. Being able to put it in reverse and then hit that throttle button and go in reverse, it's a really nice feature that just allows you to do more with a trike with less effort out of yourself, having to get up and try to manage the size of it and back it up with your legs. This, you can simply stay put it in reverse, back it up just like a vehicle, and it's got a really nice sharp turning radius because of the 3-wheel design, so you can really turn it around in a tight space, and with backing up, that makes it really easy to back it into a tight spot. Just very practical, very useful, and not many companies are doing it, so I just like to point out and give a shout to PuckiPuppy for actually adding it on this trike. Now, some things to be aware of that are not going to be as nice, I would say. Some things to keep in mind are going to be the fact that the display, when I did activate cruise control with the throttle, there was no indicator on the display, And aside from me just finding out in my own hurried stop that, uh-oh, I have cruise control on, that could be just a little sketchy for some folks. So just be aware that holding the throttle will activate cruise control, at least on this model. And hopefully in the future, PuckiPuppy's able to add an icon on the screen for when you do activate that, even accidentally. At least you know, okay, I'm on cruise control, so you can start planning for your stop a little bit quicker. Now, the good news is when I hit the brakes, regardless of cruise control, it acted like it should. It immediately cut the cruise control off. So even if you panicked and hit the brakes, you're still going to immediately stop. It's not going to do anything, you know, dangerous. It's just if you don't know it's on, that's when it starts to get a little concerning. So just definitely want to point that out. Now, the other thing I would bring up on here, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that's more visually on my mind all the time, is there's a lot of cable management. It's a little bit messy on this bike. It's all there and it's all working like it should. I don't know the best way to do it. I'm not a bike engineer, but there could be a way just to clean these up a little bit, maybe less quick disconnects on them so they have a thinner profile and quickly routed into the frame or just alongside the frame, but they seem a little bit messy up here. However, I never had them get in the way. They never caused me any issues, just more of an aesthetic thing on here. And then the final thing I would bring up would be the handlebar. Not that I don't like the handlebar, I actually do like the handlebar. It gives you a lot of hand placements and a lot of gear placement options. What I would say I'd like to recommend is adding to this spot some trikes like the ElectricBikeReview, I think, have an adjustable stem right here. Even though it has this telescoping aspect, that allows you to kind of adjust the angle of this reach a little bit. And I think for some people with shorter arms, shorter torsos, they might be able to benefit from a better fit. We've got tons of adjustability in the saddle, which is awesome. If we could just get a little in the handlebar area, I think that would go a long way in making sure every rider, whether they're that 5 foot tall or 6'2", can get the right reach and comfortable ride. But all in all, I had no other issues with the bike. Just keep in mind, it is 120 pounds, so it's not something you're gonna put on any bike rack. And if you do travel with it, it's gonna have to go in the bed of a truck, or it's gonna have to go on some sort of trailer. But other than that, you won't be hanging this on a bike rack, which is just something else to keep in mind. If you usually take your bikes to a park and then go ride, this would not be something you'd wanna do that on. This should be something you can park in the garage or the house and just get on and drive it away, come back home, park it, almost like a vehicle. Other than that, those are really all I had. Everything was done pretty well on this, and it's been fun to ride. All right, so there you have it, guys, the new PuckiPuppy Rottweiler. And this is kind of their beefy, peppy, all-terrain trike. We've got full suspension, we've got folding capability, we've got a really unique handlebar with lots of different hand placements and places to attach extra gear, this massive 17 by 20 inch rear cargo basket, and up to 55 miles of promised range. Now, is it perfect? No, because like I say all the time, no e-bike is perfect. I'd like to have a better cruise control system that lets me know as soon as I turn it on, even if accidentally, like that twist throttle incident I had, and I just want to pass that on to you guys, so hopefully it doesn't happen to you. And aside from that, I'd like to see maybe an adjustable stem added to the top of that stem so you can kind of dial in that reach a little bit more. But other than that, everything was pretty good on this, and it's a pretty punchy, beefy, and high muscle trike. So if anybody's out there looking for something like that, definitely give the PuckiPuppy Rottweiler a look. Now, if I missed anything that you'd like to know about this, just drop a comment down below and I'll get that information to you personally so you can make the best decision you can. And until the next review comes out, I'll see you out on the trail.